do weight training. That one, I think, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, oh wait. I think. Okay. Fine. Right. I think we're live. I hope
Okay.
that we're live. I'm just gonna have a little check. 'Cause I just can't believe that this has worked.
Why don't you think it would work?
Well, I just can't see how this would go live onto Instagram without me being on Instagram. I know it said that one hasn't worked. So maybe I'm just going to check my Facebook to see if that's worked. And apparently all of the comments will come up as well. Oh, it is live on there. Well, there you go. That did work.
So are we
Shocking.
live on Instagram?
We're not live on Instagram. That didn't work. But we are live on Facebook.
Are we?
It's very
So
exciting.
is this the plan then now? We're going to do podcasts live with a
No,
face.
I was actually just testing it for the webinar because I'm going to use this for the webinar tomorrow.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're here, so we may as well answer some questions in podcast. So do you want to do the first question?
Yeah. Shall I go ahead now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was wondering if there is any difference when to do weight training. Heard from some coaches that it's better to train between meals so that I'm assuming this is muscle, so that the muscle would grow more, and from the others that there's no difference. Basically, is it okay to train on an empty stomach first thing in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And normally when people are arguing about this, it's about, okay, what's practical versus what you actually, well, sorry, what's optimal versus what you're actually going to do. If your goal is to build muscle, then training first thing in the morning without having eaten is certainly not optimal, right? But then you've got to think of, is that the only time of day you're going to be able to train? Are you more likely to get it done if you just get up and do it first thing? In which case, that's going to get you far better results than waiting until the optimal time, an hour after lunch, when actually you're meant to be at work. So you have to think, okay, what am I actually going to get done? What's practical for me? What do you ever train fasted? What's your sort of take on
Well,
this?
I do, but it's not because I particularly have a performance related goal with that. It's just probably because I have to work out first thing. So it's usually between 6:30 and 7:30. It's just, my optimal time would be like 9 a.m., but that's never going to happen. And my weight training is only like 40 minutes. But like you say, if I'm more just doing enough, and that kind of suits where I'm at. And for an ideal world, I'd have like the best optimal program, and but that's fine for me now, and it gets it done. I will say as well, if at the weekend when I'm training later, I will definitely make sure I have a better breakfast beforehand, and it does help me. And it won't be huge, but just enough, and I've got better stamina throughout. But I don't find it a real issue. What I will say is it helps me to eat later in the evening, not my evening meal, but I've found if I don't eat, if I cut off at say 6, 7 p.m., which I've tried stupidly, that I'll finish, not listen to my appetite, finish then because it's better for digestion and all that. I'm just ravenous in the morning. And I still don't like eating before a workout. So I'm fine with it. I usually do have healthy supper.
Yeah, I think
Just something so then it's not like a big long 12-hour fast plus, and it just helps. I notice a difference if I don't do that.
Yeah, and also you've filled your muscles with glycogen, right? You've had a decent meal, and then realistically, you've chilled out for a bit and gone to bed. So you've not used that up. You'll still have plenty of energy in the morning. And then I just want to add as well, because I do the same, right? And there's a lot of things that people will do that are not optimal, but will still get you more results than you could probably ever want, right? Like, and again, not to kind of blow our own trumpets, but I will certainly say, like, Tony's in incredible shape, right? When you say, I'm just doing enough to get it done, like most people would be like, wow, that's like insane results, right? So don't think that we're saying, oh, you're just doing enough to get it done and you're not going to be in great shape. But you can absolutely get in great shape without optimizing the thing for like the exact time in which you need to work out. Now, I would also argue that you'd probably not physically notice any difference between one person that trained optimally at the best time for muscle protein synthesis after a workout versus the other person that trained in the morning. And if you're training in the morning, it means that you're more consistent, then you're probably going to get better results, right? So I would do what's best for you and know that, like, yeah, it's not optimal, but it's probably not going to have too much of an impact anyway.
If I was to wait to the optimal circumstances, actually, it just wouldn't get done. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm exactly the same. Like, it is far less likely that I miss a workout if I do it later in the day. And I do it partly for concentration span as well. So I want to do it first thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, then. Next question.
Okay, a question on maintenance. I understand weight fluctuations, but how do you know when you're gaining weight rather than one of the other symptoms, for example, water weight? And how do you make sure you don't end up back where you started?
Trends over time. So when we say weight fluctuations, that means it's going to fluctuate up and down. And on average, over time, you should be staying around the same weight. So if you start to notice that, I don't know, maybe the week before your menstrual cycle, you put on a kilogram, but then like the month later, you're still, you've still got that kilogram there. If your weight is slowly trending up, you're in a surplus over time, right? Short-term weight fluctuations tell us very little about energy balance. Over time, they tell us quite a lot. So if your weight is trending up over time, and by that I mean like, monthly, weeks, not days. Well, yeah, weeks to months, not days. Then we can, okay, we'll probably need to cut back on something a little bit if you want to stay at your current body composition. But any short-term fluctuations are completely normal. Same with weight loss, right? It's exactly the same in the other direction. You'll have days where you lose fat, but you're heavier the next day. That's completely normal, completely inevitable. But if your weight is trending down over time, that's what we want to see for fat loss.
Yeah, I think for what I find as well is if it's a body fat change, I can tell more in clothes. Whereas if it's a fluctuation just in body weight, usually that is accompanied by bloating of some kind. So the waistband might feel tighter, but the rest of me doesn't. So I can kind of tell like a bit more like that. Whereas a good example is this morning. So I haven't worn jeans for 2 months because of the nice weather. I've come back today off holiday, feeling really great, relaxed, no bloat whatsoever. And I put my jeans on. I'm like, oh, they are snug. That buffet has shown its presence today. I'm not bothered. It'll go back to normal once.
Yeah, that's the point as well. Like, realistic maintenance does probably mean that at certain times of the year you might weigh a little bit more, like for a month or so after your holiday. So now when you're back, you're in your routine, your weight will normalize to the habits, to the way that you're living, right? So it will come back down again. But yeah, like you'll put on weight at certain times. Most people put on a little bit of weight in the winter, and that, that like 1 or 2 kilograms is going to make no difference.
No.
If you then get back to your normal routines, that's not what to freak out about. It's if it's gradually over time creeping up, then you want to be like, oh, we need to calm myself out. And by the way, that is completely normal. It happens to every single person. You get to a point you're like, I have been in a bit of surplus for a little bit of time. You don't need to yo-yo diet. You don't need to over restrict. You just need to tweak again and be like, yep, I have noticed, I used to be doing 10,000 steps. Now it's closer to 7,000. I used to be pretty, good on my breakfast and lunch. And now I'm snacking a little bit more. Okay, I need to tighten that up. And there you go. Yeah. That's it. That's what maintenance looks like.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Next question.
Yeah.
Okay, there's lots of talk about focusing on the way you feel in your clothes rather than the scale weight. I totally agree in principle, but how do you battle this when you're waiting on IVF treatment or the like, and it relies on your BMI info?
This is hard, and there are certain situations where you need to weigh a certain amount, and this would be one of them. Again, it kind of comes back to the question about weight fluctuations, right? Like what we're telling you is don't be put off by weight fluctuations. Not that like weight loss might not still be important to you over time. It's just that even if you do have a specific weight goal, which I know there is for IVF, you need to be a certain BMI, your weight's still going to fluctuate day to day, but you still need to reach that weight goal, right? It still needs to trend down. Same as if you work with like weight class athletes, and I work with a few that like they do actually need to weigh a certain amount. Most people don't. Most people, it's like, let's focus on how you feel. The other point I want to make that about that is that we often focus on how people feel. We're not saying you're not going to lose weight. We're just saying it's a much more enjoyable way to lose weight is to focus on what
Yeah.
really matters, which is how you feel, how you're performing, what your energy levels are. As a byproduct of that, you will lose weight, right?
Yeah.
So you don't need to necessarily do anything different, but there is a little bit more emphasis on like, okay, we do want to make sure that you are definitely losing fat. But I would say that most people's goal anyway should be in a healthy BMI range. And then when you get to that range, it's like, okay, well, let's focus on where within this relatively large range, you feel your best, you perform your best, and you're probably going to fluctuate, like we just said, throughout the year within that range. And that's fine. That's completely normal. But there are times when, and this is a great like example of this, where you do need to weigh a certain amount to hit a certain criteria. And they're relatively rare, right? But in this situation, it's like, yeah, we want to get you to that healthy BMI range so that you can do something incredible with your body and go through the IVF treatment.
Yeah. I think as well, it's yeah, exactly that. You do need to weigh yourself. You need to have those metrics in line with what you want to achieve, but it's also putting a lot of emphasis on your attachment to that number, isn't it? And I think as you go along working on your relationship with scales and trying to become overall more healthier in your approach, it's not all about scale weight. Those kind of things do become easier. I remember when I was pregnant with Ollie, my first, I wouldn't even let the midwife tell me my scale weight, which when I think back now, I was just like, I was no way paranoid about it. And then by the time I had Frey, I was like, whatever, I can switch off to its meaning now. There are other things that I go by. And so to keep working on all the other mindset principles as well. And those things get easier as time goes by to handle. You're
Yeah,
always going to be enslaved or, fearful of that number.
agree. And for that as well, it's like, okay, we need to get there to tick off a certain box. That's fine. Like, we'll get you there. It's not a problem. But yeah, don't overemphasize that. Okay, how do coaches deal with stress? What tips to reduce stress can they give to their clients based on working successfully with so many clients over the years? Great question.
Mm.
Do you want to go
So,
first?
yeah. Well, one of the things recently I've been very strict with is better time management and boundaries and taking responsibility for not to try and be a martyr, but a self-inflicted stress. It's down to me to implement certain boundaries and also question whether certain things I'm giving my attention to with the best will in the world, are they necessary? Are they serving me now? Some things have just had to go, be pushed to one side to really prioritize. The phone as well is one of those things, having switching off times. I've had to really focus on sleep hygiene. So the phone and electronics in the evening, which I never used to have a problem with. I found it quite a nice downtime, but it does make me a bit wired.
Mhm.
So when my sleep was really being impacted a couple of months ago, I just found it getting worse and it was really impacting me on the day. Then I've had to just really look at it and be strict with myself. And like I said, boundaries about my own boundaries as well. We really make sure that I've got this time frame of working in, and I've got to maximize that time, not just go off on a tangent and end up doing something that I'd want to do but isn't really helping. Which sounds very idealistic, like I've just decided I'm going to implement these. It's not. It's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah, it's hard work, right? Um, I do agree with all those things, like prioritizing what's really important. I think also reframing the way that you think about stress and realizing
Mhm.
that anything that you're stressed about is something that you enjoy. So if you've got a lot of stresses in your life, usually that's because there's loads of important things in your life. Like, for example, like, you're working two different jobs, you have a family that you care about, you've got a partner that you need to support and be a good partner to, you've got kids that you need to look after, and they've all got their sports and they're healthy and they're happy and they're doing exams, and that, you know, like there's all these different stresses.
Mm-hmm.
But also that's because you have such an incredible and full life, right? It's not a negative thing. Like the stress of
Yeah,
kids, like
totally. Yeah, I'm very much in agreement with that. Yeah.
so there's that of like actually weirdly reframing it and like appreciating all the stress that you have, and like the same for me is, but I live obviously have very different stresses, but sometimes I might be a bit like, and everyone can get like this, like woe is me, like, oh my God, there's so many people that want things from me, and like this business is doing this and someone else wants this and someone asked me to this, and it's like, yeah, because you're in demand because you run successful businesses,
Yeah, exactly.
that's what
Yeah.
you've worked so hard to build, right? And of course it was going
Yeah.
to be stressful, and of course there's like demands of that, but when you're like, wow, actually that like these stresses are kind of like part of being successful, whether that's in business, in family, in life, in other areas, like you care about your career because it's a career that you love and you're passionate about, and you know, like you're stressed about your job because you don't want to lose it. Like realistically, if you didn't care, you wouldn't be stressed about it. So
Mm-hmm.
do remember
Yeah.
that not all the stuff that you stress about is the stuff that you care about, right? So don't wish away your stresses. They're probably the most important things in your life. The second thing that I've been trying to do recently is take the pressure off, because I've realized whether you put pressure on yourself and whether you're stressed about it or not, the stuff needs to get done. Now, you can either do it real stressed with a ton of pressure and not enjoy it at all,
Mm-hmm.
or you can do the exact same things without the stress and without the pressure and enjoy it a hell of a lot more. And it feels completely different, even though it's the same thing, right? It's a lot of like what we talk about with um, fat loss. You know, like, hey, if you take the pressure off and you focus on feeling good, and you're like, I'm going to go for a walk today because I want to feel good. I'm going to fuel myself with healthy, nutritious food because
Mm-hmm.
I care about my body and I deserve to. And, you know, like I want to feel my best. I'm going to get to sleep at a decent time. So I want to wake up tomorrow feeling like capable and feeling good and having high energy.
Yeah.
They're all the same things that you need to do to lose fat, but they're framed in a very different way and they feel completely different. It's from like restrictive and kind of like forcing yourself to do something to like,
Mm.
I don't have to do this. I get to do this, and
Yeah.
this is an empowering thing that makes me feel good. So there's that element as well. And then the other thing you were touching on about like time off. One thing, again, I've been thinking about a lot recently. This is such a when I saw this question, I was like, this is so apt for me at the moment because I have been struggling a bit with feeling like there's been a lot of pressure and pulled in different ways. Um, is being resilient, right? Like, and if you get like, if you're thinking, okay, how can I be more resilient? How can I? Because sometimes something will go wrong, and it's like water off duck's back. I'm like, okay, cool. What are we gonna do to fix it? Let's go. What needs done? Like, who needs me? Like, how can I help? And other times I'm like, oh my god, one more thing has gone wrong, and like I actually can't, like I can't deal with this. And a lot of that is to do with hormones. I'm not gonna lie. It would depend on the time of the month that this thing has gone
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
But can set yourself up to be more resilient. So that's why I try and get to bed at a decent time. That's why I also prioritize exercise in the morning because I know my
Mm-hmm.
brain is focused. I've got more patience. I'm more resilient.
Yeah.
You know, all of these things really impact essentially the level of stress that you can deal with. Now, if you come back to my first point about the things that you're most stressed about, the things that you care about most, you don't want less stress. You want more ability to be able to deal with stress.
Completely. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
essentially what you know, what we help people do on Commit to Six. You know, it's not, we always
Yeah.
talk, it's not just about fat loss, it's about feeling your best, it's about being more resilient, it's about being able to deal with more. And, you know, like this is an inevitable part of coaching and coaching so many people. But I was thinking about this last night, and the real like passion and joy I have for coaching, and I know that you'll resonate with this, especially because the women you work with are mostly perimenopausal women. They're sometimes going through a hell of a lot. And unfortunately, that phase of life often also comes with grief and loss in different areas of life. And, you know, you've got higher risk of things
Mm-hmm.
like breast cancer. And like we coach a lot of people through diagnosis, treatment of themselves or their partners or their friends, or, you know, like one of our members, like their husband just had a stroke, and, you know, like numerous members have had breast cancer treatment. And it's such an honor to be able to support people through that. Like I think it's such an odd thing to say, but it's one of the best things about coaching is like, wow, we get to be the people that your support system when you're trying to give so much to other people, right? When you're trying to be the resilient one, when you're trying to show up for your family, when you're trying to support so many other people, it's like we get to support you so that you can help other people support
It's
themselves.
just the best feeling. I remember when I was on holiday a couple of weeks ago, and I was getting a bit stressed about the Wi-Fi and things that had just not gone quite to plan. And when the check-ins arrived, and I think I messaged you at the time because I tend to do that, and when that motion like hits, there are women at the other end of our check-ins who are so appreciative and so grateful of your time and input. And it is such a privilege to be involved with them. And you do take real pride and care in looking out for them. And that to me is just the best job.
Yeah.
So when I get all these check-ins, and that, I think really that alludes to the point of me being disciplined with time, because I'm sometimes stressed because, like I said, I've gone off on a tangent, and especially working from home, I've had to be so disciplined and not to go and do the washing, not to go and go through the mail and sort out appointments, and no, work is work, and differentiate those lines, because that's on me to be disciplined with my time,
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah,
get
and I
things done.
think even like it's probably still a good example is like, sometimes we'll get to our emails and we're like, oh, there's a lot of check-ins to get done here. And that could
Yeah.
feel quite stressful. And this is a good example of reframing that and being like, how freaking incredible that I get to help all of these women, that I get to be the support system here, that I get to offer my
Mhm.
expertise, that, I get to help them, even in the smallest way, improve their life in some way. That's just like the
Especially when
biggest.
you get, when you get those replies back as well, saying how much it's helped them, you're like, oh, bring it on, more.
Yeah. Good. Okay, we'll do one more question because I basically wanted to test this out, and
Okay.
looks like it's working. All right. Maybe how to change the mindset that a bad day deserves a wine or a stressful day deserves a wine, and what to do to change the mindset and the action. Do you like wine?
No, not really. No,
No, me
chocolate. If it
neither.
was me, I'd be like chocolate in. Yeah, that's my
Okay,
go-to.
well,
I'm not a drinker,
replace with
but I
chocolate.
get what she's saying. Yeah. I think this boils down to lots of nuance to this, but boils down to how you're using food, and often it's a coping mechanism that you've just acquired over time. It's your go-to for sometimes one or two things, or often it's your go-to for everything when you don't want to deal with uncomfortable emotions, and it's you eat something and it makes you feel better, and you don't have to do the hard gritty work of thinking things through. And especially when our minds are it's very
Oh,
hard to. Can you hear me?
yeah, you went away, but now
Okay.
you're back. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if our minds are so busy and stressed and cluttered with thinking about things and worried about things, of course we're not going to go and naturally, unless we're really aware and be doing the work. You're not. It's much easier to just grab something that makes you feel great in the moment. Okay. And I think that's conditioning, and not a quick process, but it is a process that's you try things and learn from questioning what are you trying to feel better about. This is why journaling is so good, or just being reflective, having conversations with yourself. I think Maureen mentioned that she talks to herself, and I did relate to that because I don't necessarily journal in the evening anymore, but when I'm driving, that's my time to go through things in my head, and it's a great contemplative time. But really it's about working out why I'm taking that route rather than dealing with things. It's almost a procrastination way. And, emotional eating takes on many forms, doesn't it? Sometimes it's just like you're used to using that way, using food, using the foods that it's never broccoli that we reach for, is it? It's always those ultra
Yeah, I
processed
can't say
foods
that
that we have
broccoli
attachments from.
doesn't bring the most comfort to most people, but you do need
No.
to think about, okay, well, what normally it's not just the wine, it's everything around the wine. right? So if you're like, oh, I've had a stressful day, I want to recharge, you know, have a nice bath with a wine. Like, would it be that different if you had a bath with another drink that didn't have as many calories or alcohol in it? You know, probably not. Or, you know, after a really stressful week, and we had a Commit 6 client who did this actually. She was like, I used to every Friday with my partner, you know, we'd sit out in the garden and we'd just kind of like share this bottle and put the world to rights. It's one of my favorite things that we do together. We're like, well, we're certainly not taking that away from you. Like, that sounds like such a nice way to unwind from the week. So what about if we just changed that to like a different drink that wasn't a whole bottle of wine, you know?
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, and I did it this week, and it was exactly the same. You know, it didn't need to be the wine. That's what I realized. It was everything else around that. So it's really finding different ways to de-stress, to, hey, like, you know, you're allowed to reward yourself after a long stressful week. You're like, well, I got through the week.
Completely, yeah.
Okay, how are you going to do that? Is it a nice meal? You know, is it a nice meal that like you really enjoy, and you or maybe you do want the wine and you save the calories for some wine, but there are loads of different ways that you can unwind. And normally what you realize is it wasn't the calories in the meal, it wasn't the wine per se, it was
It's
everything
that
that was.
ritual sometimes, isn't it, of nurturing yourself and going to this little area that you know is yours and your sanctuary, and you can switch off from whatever it is that's made you feel the way you feel.
Yeah, agree. All right, that was amazing. Thank you for your brain and for your time and for your brilliant answers. We will be back
And thank
shortly.
you.
Huh?
I said thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. All right, bye.
Bye. See you later. Bye.